The Bookshelf with Ryan Tubridy is brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. Eason have a rich heritage of bookselling since 1886, and it's probably where you got your first ever book, or maybe your last one, and indeed, hopefully, your next one after you listen to this episode of our podcast. And stay listening for our Ryan Recommends slot, my weekly recommendation, where I'll discuss a book I've read recently that I think you'll really enjoy too. As ever, all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired. You're very welcome to The Bookshelf with me, Ryan Tubridy, and today we're delighted to have Alastair Campbell as our guest, a writer, a communicator, a strategist. Alastair is best known for his role as former British Prime Minister's Tony Blair's spokesman, press secretary and director of communications and strategy. But this is just barely scratching the surface. With his keen understanding of politics and media, he has been a key figure in shaping public discourse, whether you like it or not. Is that fair to say, Alastair Campbell?
Yeah, I hope so.
Today we're going to find out a little bit more about this man. Far cry from politics for the most part. We're going to talk to you about your life through the prism of three books that you've plucked from your shelf. The book from your childhood, the book that made you cry, and the book that changed your life. So let's get down to business straight away. First of all, like I say, welcome. But secondly, I get the sense from the cradle you were reading. You seem like a voracious reader. You're a lover of words, ideas.
Yeah, I've always loved writing.
Yes.
Including when I was a kid. I've gone through, look, there are definitely times when I'm absolutely voracious and I can read just non-stop, one book after another. Then I'll go through phases where I'm not reading at all and I really struggle to get into books. And I don't know what that relates to. And I just live with them now. I just kind of write, okay, I'm not going through a reading period.
Yes.
I'll be doing other stuff. But yeah, I remember that quite early on. I couldn't tell you how old, but it was definitely before I was 10 because we moved house from Yorkshire to Leicester. And I can remember that feeling of, I don't remember what the book was, but I remember reading a book and it was a book without pictures. And I remember just thinking, I'm really into this book.
Yes.
I'm locked in now and I cannot wait to read the next page and the next page. And then I'm going to be really disappointed when it's finished. And that's sometimes how I judge a book, is just how, if it will give me that feeling, and when it gives me that feeling, sometimes it's page 1.
Yes.
Sometimes it's page 20. If I get to page 50 and I haven't got it, I'll give up. Agreed.
Fully agreed. Abandon ship.
Whereas Fiona, my partner, will regularly be reading a book and she'll say, God, I really hate this book. And then the next day she'll be reading it, and the next day...
Masochism.
Yeah, she has to finish the book.
No.
If she started it. No, I'm not like that.
And strangely, sometimes you can go into a bookshop or you're sent a proof copy. You'll know in a paragraph, I love this. I love the style.
Yeah,
weirdly. Can you take us to pre-10-year-old Alastair Campbell? Go into, whether it's your bedroom or it's down in the kitchen. Who's in the house? Who's hanging around?
Mum, a lot of the time. Dad, less of the time. He was a vet and he was a bit of a workaholic. Worked a lot, always on call. And then 2 brothers and a sister. And that was it. And a dog. So yeah, we were really good childhood.
Yeah.
Good family, good people.
Books in the house?
Books in the house, yeah. The only books I've kept from there that I've still got, they got one of those old first sets of encyclopedia. It wasn't the Encyclopedia Britannica, it was a different one. And I've kept them. Lots of Scottish books, lots of books about Scotland. It was a very, very, very Scottish upbringing.
I'm getting that.
Yeah. So if I'm thinking now about books and from my childhood, books that I can remember seeing around the house,
yes,
a lot of them would be picture books about Scotland. There was, my dad was a big into bagpipe music, and he was a Gaelic speaker. His first language was Gaelic. It's quite a lot of Gaelic books. I actually had a go at learning it when I was about. I was obviously. I think he must have. One of the other my brothers must have annoyed him, and I was trying to get into his good book or something because I said, I think I'd like to learn Gaelic. Did about 2 lessons and never really went any further. But yeah, so it was a very, very, in fact, the book I've chosen from my childhood.
Why do we go there, your childhood book?
Yeah, well, because it relates to that in that every Monday or Tuesday, usually Tuesday, I think, the Sunday Post would arrive. And the Sunday Post was this kind of rather quaint family newspaper from Scotland. And my dad and my mum got it sent down every week. And it did, and I used to read it cover to cover on a Tuesday evening. And I liked the storytelling. I just liked the feel of it. I think that's what got me into newspapers. There was no newspapers in our family background, really. But one of the big attractions in this newspaper was a weekly 2 cartoons. One was called Wally, which was about this young boy, William Wally, and the other was the Bruins, which was this family, I think of 8 kids, who lived in this little flat in this tenement in what I always imagined to be Glasgow, but it was somewhere else. So that was the Sunday Post. But my Auntie Nan, my mum's oldest sister, she used to send us every year with a £5 at Christmas. She'd send us the annual.
Oh, okay.
And one year it was the Bruins, and the next year it was Wally.
So they alternated.
Each year by year, and they're still going. I think they were started in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So long before I was born, and they're still going. The characters have not aged a minute. It's still the same set of boys in Wally, the same family members with the same arguments about money, about tidiness, and I just loved the sort of, what did I like about it? Very easy read. I think I've always felt, well, I know I've always felt more Scottish than English. But I've also felt that whenever we go to Scotland, when all our holidays were in Scotland as kids, I always felt we were the English family. And I think that's where all the chips on my shoulder come from.
What are the chips on the shoulder?
I think it's something to do with Britain and class and the kind of whole class structure in Britain. I think some are to do with people's different understanding of what it means to be clever. I think clever is a quite complicated concept.
Yeah.
And I think it also means that I've always been quite argumentative, quite up for a fight. So I think that's how I see my chippiness, in that I don't know if I'm still chippy, but I definitely was chippy.
But did you go to Cambridge?
I did, yeah.
And that doesn't sit with the person who doesn't feel English, or it's so
no, it
quintessentially.
It fits completely with it because I absolutely hated it.
Did you?
I did, yeah, I did.
But you stayed.
I stayed. I didn't make the best of it. I think it was one of those things. Look, I'm glad I went.
Okay.
And there's no doubt that the whole Oxbridge thing still has a certain cachet. And whether it's ever actively helped me in my life, I don't know, but I think it probably has. I wonder, for example, when I first became a journalist, I got on the Mirror training scheme, and it was a graduate training scheme, and I wonder whether part of the appeal was, we went to Cambridge,
Yeah.
I don't know. But no, I didn't enjoy it, and partly because of this sense of, I came from my dad was a vet. It was a pretty middle-class family. But I arrived at Cambridge and saw people. I didn't know people like this existed. Kind of teenagers walking around in military uniforms, braying, and these accents that just grated on me, and still do, frankly. That kind of that over-the-top poshness that you sometimes still hear, and you do hear it because they're so bloody loud in the main.
And they become Prime Minister regularly.
Well, and that doesn't help.
We'll get there in a minute. We're jumping ahead. I'm still with 10-year-old you running around in the house with the comic, or younger again.
Yeah.
Did you get on with your brothers? Were you?
I did.
There was fun and.
Yeah, we got on well. I mean, I say we got on well. I nearly killed Donald once.
Well, why do we go there?
It was an accident.
Oh, okay.
It was an accident.
Okay.
He was chasing me in the garden, and I ran up to the front door. And as he was chasing me, I slammed the door, and he had glass in it, and he tried to catch it, and he's to the rest of his life he had this scar right down there, and I've never seen blood like it.
Crikey.
So that was pretty scary. Yeah, no, he and I very close, particularly later in life,
yes,
when he got diagnosed with schizophrenia. But we were all close. Graham and I, absolutely fanatical about sport, cricket, rugby, football, Burnley, all that. You know, we were very, very, I think sport was a big bond for us. And then Donald, we both played the bagpipes. Music was a big thing. Music's always been a big thing for me.
Yes.
We're good.
You mentioned schizophrenia, Donald's schizophrenia. Did you think you saw it? Did you sense it before it was diagnosed? Did you was it obvious, or did you kind of go, God, that was a bit odd that he said that or did that, or?
No, I didn't do that.
Any sense of it? No,
the only sense I would say is that in his teens, so he was 3 years older than me. So he had a bedroom to his own. Graham and I shared a bedroom next door. And I can always remember that he was the one that my parents used to struggle to get out of bed in the morning to go to school. And I've often wondered whether that was something going on there. But no, I never, funny enough, that not long before he was diagnosed, and he was in the Scots Guards, was not long before he was diagnosed, he was home, and he was on great form.
Yeah.
Absolutely on great form, and he was incredibly generous. I mean, he just used to come home. He came home on leave. I think he'd been in Belfast, and he came home on leave, and he was just chucking £10 notes at me, Graham, and Liz, and I'll have some of this. You know, it was like I was still at school, but yeah. So no, when it actually happened, it was a massive shock.
A shock to you all, and to you personally.
Well, to all of us, and you know, my mum. I remember my mum. She's saying this was years later.
Yeah.
Like when she was quite elderly. I remember we were talking about Donald. She said, you know, that phone call, when we got the phone call when Donald was in Netley, which was this hospital in Hampshire, she said, my life changed with that phone call. It never changed back again. And I get that, because he became, look, he ended up living on his own. He actually had a pretty good life considering. He had a marriage which didn't last. He ended up having a pretty good job at Glasgow University, working in the security team, but he was also the piper to the university. He was happy most of the time. He would say, apart from what he used to call this shitty illness, he had a good life.
Yes.
His funeral was like, you know, hundreds of people. He had good friends, good family, loved his music, obsessed with his bagpipes, but had this terrible illness and had this capacity when he was well to think he didn't need to take his meds, and then away he'd go again.
If it's not too dark, can I ask you where you were when you heard that he'd died?
I was in France. In France.
Phone call or? Yeah,
my sister phoned me up, and he'd not been well for a while. That was horrific. And he was 62. And the thing about, this is the other thing that gets me angry about mental illness. So I remember years ago reading up on it and reading this research paper that said, on average, people who have to take antipsychotic medication over a long period of time may live 20 years less than the average population. So my dad was 82 when he died, and my brother was 62.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, it's only that. He didn't, in the end, he died of respiratory stuff and of inability to fight and yet another infection. But when he died, my sister and I, we had this map. We had this map of Britain, and we were trying to remember all the different places where he'd had to have medical care at some point. And he, you know, given all that, I think he'd have looked back on his life thinking he did all right. He had an okay life.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we were all there for him, definitely. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. When do you miss him most, your brother?
Probably when I'm playing the pipes.
You play the pipes a lot.
Yeah. I definitely play more since my dad and my brother died. Yeah, definitely.
Why?
I think partly because they've gone, actually. They're his pipes as well. He was a bit of a hoarder. So I've always played the pipes, and I've always had one, maximum 2 sets of pipes, right? When he died, my sister and I went through, there were like about 20 kilts, about 30 kilt belts, about 20 practice chanters. He's just a hoarder. But he had this one set of pipes that he absolutely loved. And they are the best set of pipes he ever had. And so I've now got those, and I play those. So yeah, it's probably when I'm listening to the pipe, when I'm playing the pipes or listening to music. Yeah.
Let's go back to I want to bring up to kind of 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
You're brilliant in school. I mean, you are brilliant. You're great at French.
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
You're doing great at French. You're probably a bit of a pain in the neck at school to the teachers.
Probably.
Putting up a fight. Clever. Like what? Okay. Walk a mile in your teacher's shoes. Mm-hmm. Look down the classroom. Look at 15-year-old you. What are we looking at?
I think it would depend on the teacher.
Okay.
No, but I think it would and I think that this is where I struck lucky.
Okay.
Because my favourite teachers were my languages, English and maths teachers.
Wow.
And that's what I was good at. And I definitely... Look, they would have seen a very irritating, on one level quite irritating. So we left Yorkshire when I was 11 and we moved to Leicester. And I don't know what it was, but I just sort of... I think leaving Yorkshire was a big thing. Definitely was a big thing. I wasn't happy about it. And I got to Leicester and I didn't like it as much as Keighley, as much as Yorkshire. I was missing my football team, Burnley. Anyway.
Yeah.
We had our school uniform was a black jacket and sort of grey trousers and a white shirt and a tie. Okay.
Classic.
Yeah. I decided fairly early on in my Leicester school career that I would never, ever take my coat off. And I would never take my Burnley scarf off.
Oh my God. I can't decide who I feel sorry for, your mother, the teachers, or,
So I had this, and it wasn't even a very nice coat. It was a blue anorak and the Burnley scarf. And there was one point, I think it was called Mr. Bell. Was it Mr. Bell? Anyway, the head teacher at one point said that some of the teachers felt it would be appropriate if and I said, well, they're gonna have to remove it because I'm not taking it off. And they eventually just sort of went with it.
What were you trying to prove?
I think I was sort of saying I don't really belong here. I'm back to the kind of outsider-insider thing, Did
you not get shoved for that? Or did you not get othered for that in the classroom? Or were you too big or too bolshy? I
was big, but I wasn't like I wasn't...
You're a tough guy.
No, I didn't have a reputation. Some of the kids in the school had a real reputation. I didn't have a reputation.
But you weren't mocked or...
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'll tell you one thing. We were all... My two brothers were older than me.
Yeah.
So they were there.
Helps.
We were all called Jock. Get that?
That's a Scottish reference, obviously. But
so that is the English people saying, basically,
Jock.
You lot are jocks.
And the Irish are paddies and the English are jocks and so on. Okay.
Exactly. So we were all called Jock. Even though, as I said earlier, when we went to Scotland, we were seen as English. So So I think I was just saying, I don't really belong here. So apart from PE, I took it off in PE. The Burnley scarf. And
generous concession.
Indeed.
I can see the peace process coming up. I can see this whole idea of But
I'll tell you, when you said what the teachers said, so I would say that, because the thing is, I wasn't a swot in that I didn't sort of, I wasn't trying to be the teacher's pet the whole time. But the stuff that I liked, I really liked it. And I loved that. Back to the thing about words, that feeling when I was learning French or German, and it suddenly sort of clicked in my head.
You like the etymology? Is that it?
Just like, you suddenly find yourself that the teacher has put something up on the board, and you've done it like that because you get it, you understand it in a way that some of the other kids probably to this day don't understand it because they were just struggling with the concepts.
Yeah.
And then the reason why I've chosen the book, the third book you've asked me to choose, Madame Bovary, is because that was an amazing feeling when I suddenly realised I was reading a book in French and there was no translation going on in my head.
Well, let's flip things and a light on that straight away.
Yeah.
The book that changed your life, Madame Bovary. Before we get to it, you're reading it. You've described it. You're reading it in French.
Yeah.
And you're understanding it clearly.
Yeah.
Okay, give us the elevator pitch for the book. So for we get.
Well, coincidentally, it is seen as one of the greatest novels ever written. Flaubert, amazing author, and it's the story of a woman who goes a bit off the rails.
Mm-hmm. She has wealth and
she has a
financial wealth, but not.
Well, no, she marries this rather dull doctor called Charles, and then she discovers that she likes to stray from the marital bed, and it all ends a bit messily and a bit nastily, and I won't give away the ending.
But why did this book change your life?
Because I think it's the book that made me absolutely fall in love with French.
Right.
And through that, in the understanding of the importance of other languages, of our own language as well. So I think it actually made me fall in love with language.
Yeah.
But it was that feeling, like the feeling I had as a child of I am loving this book. With this one, it was more I cannot believe that I am understanding this book, which is in a foreign language, and I was still only in my teens. And so that I think is, and I could have picked other books that with the same feeling, but I think because it is such a great novel, I've gone for that one to pretend I'm a bit highbrow.
Well, I know it's good to we get that sometimes, curated choices, but you're
But I went lowbrow for my childhood. I've gone a bit highbrow. So.
I can't wait to see the next one after that. But the third way, of course. But let's talk a bit about that. You've gone for less the story, more the phenomenon of language and falling in love with because you speak German fluently as well. Don't
I wouldn't
you?
say I'm fluent. I was fluent for a while. I'm getting my fluency back.
Yes.
I lost it, and then I'm getting it back.
What sort of authors were you reading for fun then? As a teenager and heading towards your 20s, you know, people do the Catcher in the Rye or Kill a Mockingbird or whatever it might be, or On the Road. Are we reading classics, or did you have people you liked to read?
No, I didn't read classics. I I'll tell you what I used to read loads about sport.
Okay.
I would say one of the most. Yeah, probably one of my favourite English language novels to this day is David's story, The Sporting Life.
Yes.
Which I think, and I think you could say it's probably about 60 years now since it came, or maybe even more, I don't know, which is about rugby leagues.
Yeah.
Again, I think, it's the
Richard Harris in the movie, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Great film. Kitchen sink drama, as they called it at the time.
Well, but I think it was deeper than that. And I think it was about the North, and it was about how the North felt about itself. So I used to love stories like that it kind of took me from areas that I was particularly interested in. And in fact, one of the novels I've written is essentially about football and actually in the IRA.
Yes.
But so I think sport is one of those areas where there just aren't enough really good novels. I think it's to do with the fact that it's the event that matters so much. So I'd read stuff like that. I'd
be able to chime in with the Damned United, which I think is one of the great books of the last 20 years plus. I mean, it's just a wonderful.
You're not really
not Johnny Sport. I speak Pigeon Sport, but not like your fluency.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always intrigued by your Burnley.
Yeah, well, that's
fascination. I
think that is the other thing that happened, and reason maybe why that book spoke to me so much. It goes back to this thing about, we were from Scotland, we were from the North, and then we got moved.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that did build a bit of a resentment. But as a kid, I was reading a lot of French books. I was reading people I remember reading Maupassant short stories, and I remember it was Zola I got into really quite soon.
Yes.
So I was probably, even as a teenager, I was probably reading more French than English.
You were quite ahead of the curve. I think if anyone in my class in school was seen reading Maupassant or Flaubert or whatever, they would probably be doing it discreetly on their own. Because it's quite a flex, to use the expression.
Yeah, but I was so happy to be able to read in a foreign language. I just loved it. And I remember, I think it was at my A level, one of them, I remember in the mock, I got 100%. And I was really chuffed about that.
Were you a show-off? I always find this interesting about you is, okay, because it's a school, I know obviously from from the Blair years on, I would have known you from TV and radio and newspapers and so on. But before that, I don't know enough about you in the sense that, you know, when you were communications in Downing Street, you were the back room, but you're behind the scenes. Ostensibly, you became very front and center, obviously, as it went along. But I was trying to figure out then what were you like then as a teenager and into the 20s? Did you want the microphone? Did you want to be the front man, or were you happy to be a backing singer? I couldn't quite figure that out. Where was that?
I think I was. I don't know what's your definition of a show off?
You're looking at one. Okay. You know, somebody who's comfortable with the microphone.
Somebody wants to be on the telly.
No, that's too glib, Alastair.
Okay.
It's somebody who's very steady now.
Somebody who wants to be seen as the best.
Somebody who's very happy to be in front of a crowd and isn't.
Yeah, I'm definitely got that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Definitely got
that. And the next question is, there you go. Do you need it? I mean, is it fuel? That's the other question. Probably for a show off, yes. But yeah, go on, back to you. More importantly, you say you like a crowd.
I don't always like a crowd, but I like having a voice. I like having a voice, and I like the fact that people seem to want to hear it.
Yeah.
Not everybody. Lots of people don't want to hear it. Lots of people would be very happy if they never heard it again. But in the main, I have a voice which I can use, and I like that. I also like having the freedom to choose when I use my voice.
Yes.
I can switch off, I can go away, I can bury my head under the blankets and just decide I'm not going to face the world. So I like that freedom. But yeah, I probably was a bit of a show-off. I think the scarf and the coat, that was probably a bit of that.
A bit performative.
Playing the bagpipes.
Jesus.
I mean, you know, I was a busker for quite a while.
I know. Around Europe, was it?
Yeah. So that's kind of look at me.
Yeah.
Pay me to look at me.
Well, you know, some people do it discreetly with a guitar and a few Beatles numbers. I mean, the bagpipes is a cry for help, like, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Come on, Alastair.
It's the perfect busking instrument. It is. I'm telling you.
In 2 seasons of this show.
It is.
How?
Because, I'll tell you exactly how. Because if you're the guy with the guitar playing the Beatles numbers,
yeah,
and you go up to a load of restaurants in the south of France, you've got to play about 10 songs, right? If you're playing the bagpipes, you rock up, you strike up, you blow out all the other singers who've got no chance because you're making more noise than them.
Sure.
You make the people in the restaurant laugh and they go, oh, there's a guy playing the bagpipes. You stop after a minute, you go round with a hat, you clean up, then you move on to the next place. It is the best busking instrument there is, believe me.
It's a metaphor. It's got to be a metaphor for something in life. The other thing I thought about before I ever met you, and I've met you a few times to interview you about your diaries and other things as the years went by, was I always thought you're going to be a very grumpy person. I just got that sense off the TV and
the vibe.
Yeah, I got a sense that you're going to be grumpy and a little bit difficult. And I'm glad to say I was wrong. I don't think you're... No, you are easier company than I was expecting. But
I can be grumpy.
Where did that come from, that image? Or was it an image? Was it curated, to use the word?
No, I think it was exaggerated. I think there was an element of... I think when I did the job in working for Tony Blair, I think the press built me up as a bit of a caricature.
Yeah.
And I think, like most caricatures, there were elements of truth to it.
Did you watch the thick of it, the Malcolm Tubridy?
Oh yeah.
And did you roar laughing, or were you disgusted? Like, did you love it?
Yeah.
And and of course, people said there was a bit of you in that.
I love it.
You loved it. Why did you love it so much? I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites.
Well, because it's so funny. It is so funny. I remember Grace, my daughter, once coming back from school, and she said, "Dad, you know the thick of it?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "All the kids are talking about it. Is it really based on you?" Then before I could answer, she said, "Please say yes."
Yeah.
So she, no, I just think it's brilliant comedy.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's brilliant satire.
Yeah.
And the thing for satire to work, there's got to be something in it.
Kernel of truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always say, well, look, Malcolm Tucker's job was to try to control the media agenda and to try and keep the cabinet in order.
Mm.
Well, that was kind of what I was trying to do on behalf of the elected Prime Minister.
Yes.
Keep the cabinet and the government sort of, moving in the same direction.
Yes.
Through strategic communication and so forth, and a bit of discipline from time to time, and at the same time deal with a media pack that is very, very difficult to deal with. And I think the grumpiness came from the fact that I had been a journalist. And once I jumped the fence onto the political side,
Yes.
in my head and my heart, I was no longer a journalist. I was very clear with them. I am no longer here for you. I am no longer of you. It's back to the kind of outsider-insider thing. I am no longer in your team. I am in a completely different team. Now, as it happens, I'd never really been in their team anyway, because most of the press in Britain were pretty biased to the right. I'll tell you when I burnt a lot of bridges was when Neil Kinnock was leader, and he went to America, and I went. All the media went with him to see Reagan, and I ended up writing a piece for the New Statesman. It wasn't a piece for the Mirror, but I did it for the New Statesman, and it was about how the press behaved on that trip, and the headline was "You guys are the pits." So I was never the most collegiate member of the lobby. But I think so. Then what happened was that the grumpiness came from just occasionally not losing my rag. I did lose my rag a bit, but not very often. But just kind of not suffering fools and calling stuff out. And
Are you a driven person?
yeah.
And what's that? What drives you? What makes you want to be the best at French and the best at communications, the best at podcasting, the best at what's that from? Is that parental? Is it personal? Is it?
I honestly don't know, because I don't think we all had it. 4 kids, we all had the same parents. We all ended up very different. I don't know what it is. Whether it's a thing about proving myself to myself or to somebody else, I don't know. I am ridiculously competitive.
Yeah.
And in fact, yesterday, you mentioned the podcast. We had
The Rest is Politics with Rory Stewart. Yeah, great podcast. Yeah.
And we had we do this Q&A, and we get questions sent in. We get thousands of questions sent in, but I've noticed a steady stream of, can you please stop boasting about the fact that it's the most popular podcast in the country? Yeah. Can you, so I got ticked off last week because I told Anthony Scaramucci and Katty Kay, who are doing the American version.
I was listening.
Right. And I said, you never ever plug our podcast in the way that I always plug yours.
First thing they did in the next episode.
Correct.
I heard you. They did their homework.
They did it.
And you post on Instagram the charts.
I did.
All the time. Look at me.
Yeah.
Said the man who doesn't want to be the front singer, the lead singer.
But that's part of the competitiveness.
Okay. Not the attention.
I'm doing that to remind other lesser podcasts to stop marketing themselves as number one when they're not. That's all it is.
I know who you're talking about as well, but we'll keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
What age were you when that happened?
28.
And did you see it coming, or did you fall off a cliff?
Probably a bit of both.
And when do you think the first rumble was coming where you went, this is not good and the wheels are coming off?
No, I think I did fall off a cliff, actually.
Okay.
Because I think I'd been in denial. I think other people saw it coming. I think Fiona saw it coming. I think I had friends who saw it coming.
And what was the cliff?
The cliff was what was the cliff? The cliff was a psychotic meltdown.
Yeah.
Up in Scotland. I was with Neil Kinnock. And I just started losing my way in every way imaginable, literally. Flew up to Scotland. I picked up a hire car, and I ended up driving round and round about hundreds of times.
Wow.
Right. And then and as I was doing that, I was thinking, this is weird. This is not right. This is bad. Yeah. I was meant to be spending the day with Neil Kinnock for a piece I was writing. He was going to the Scottish Labour Party conference. He was visiting Rosyth Naval Dockyard, right? Where sort of top secret naval dockyard. I ended up dumping my hire car at Rosyth and going into the building and saying to this guy, he must have been very confused, I've got a car there, I can't drive it, here's the keys, here's a number, phone this guy, he's at the newspaper I work for, tell him he's going to have to pick it up himself. And off I went, found a taxi, got a taxi to Perth, where now Neil Kinnock's gone on to Perth. Then, you know, that thing when you're really, really stressed, you're losing everything all the time. So I couldn't find my keys and all sorts of stuff. And then, so the day went on like that. And then by the end of the day, I was literally, that was the cliff. That was when I was hearing voices and imagining, seeing things that couldn't work out what was real, what wasn't. actually, consciously, I was very worried that I was getting the same as Donald. This was because he used to talk about hearing voices and stuff like that. Anyway, then I got arrested.
For
my own safety.
Yeah.
And thank God I did, because God knows where it was going. I was actually, at the point I got arrested, I was building a little pile of possessions on the floor in this council building in Hamilton, in Fife. Not a clue what I was doing.
Wow.
Emptying my bag, emptying my pockets, putting my clothes on top of the pockets, on top of this little pile of stuff. I mean, not a clue what I was doing, not a clue.
God, it's just tragic, because how many people are doing that today?
And then they're done.
And people look at them going, geez, a man looks a bit off the wall. And they just need to be minded. You're 28. I don't want to get into all the great detail of how you got put back together again as such, because you're so together as I see it. I know you often refer very, I think, honestly about, just saying, I'm not in the mood today. I just don't want to. And I think that happens a lot, but you talk frankly about it. But you got put back together, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, you're 28. How long was that? Years, months?
I'd say it's almost 40 years now, nearly there.
Yeah. Okay. So you're a work in progress.
No. I think, I think the most important thing, I actually do think getting arrested was unbelievably important.
Possibly saved your life.
Well, you just don't know where was it leading?
Yeah.
Where, was I going to set fire to this thing?
Yeah. Could you hurt somebody else? That's the other thing.
Were one of these people telling me to do this stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know. So that was it. How long did it take me to get together? I think the most important thing was getting to hospital.
Yeah.
Having a very good psychiatrist there who basically led me to admit that I'd been drinking too much. Led me to admit that I couldn't blame other people for what had happened to me. This was all about what was going on in my own head. Fiona stood by me. That was a huge thing. When medication helped, went back to London, couldn't face going home and couldn't face going into London. Went down to the West Country, stayed with a friend down there. And then the next big thing was my old boss at the Mirror, a job that I'd left, taking me back. That was
big leap of faith there.
Yeah. That was a huge thing for me. Yeah.
Right.
And then it was just sort of, day by day for a few years.
When you have in Ireland, I don't know if the same expression holds here, where someone goes, he's taken to the bed for a few days, where they're just having a dip, if you want to call it that. We try to use euphemisms. We don't want to admit that somebody's actually mentally unwell or is having issues. Do you know when that's coming? When you go, do you see the clouds forming and say?
Yeah.
Do you say it to Fiona, or has she seen them coming anyway?
She won't necessarily have seen that coming, but I do. And now, I think one of the reasons it's been happening less, in recent years, is actually I got to a point where I just said it straight away. Oh God, here we go, it's coming again. And
articulating it helped.
Yeah, definitely.
I noticed in your podcast you said a few times people shout war criminal at you since Iraq. How do you process that on the street when somebody's roaring at you? Do you care, or do you acknowledge them? Do you want to have a chat with them and say, hang on a second?
Kind of depends. It doesn't happen often these days.
It was at the time.
No, I am for some. It happens occasionally.
Yeah. Does it bother you?
No. The only thing that sometimes bothers me if I think it's going to get physical.
Okay, well that's fair enough.
But generally, does it bother me? No, it doesn't bother me.
Because you had quite a lengthy chat about it on one of the podcasts that I kind of got the sense from you that there was a catharsis in the conversation you had with Rory Stewart. Was that right about the response or something?
Loads of people said that. I mean, I thought I just kind of said things that I've said a million times, but people, even Fiona said, she said, I've never heard you talk about Iraq like that before.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about the public, so if you've got a public profile, listen, you know this from if you spend all your time looking at stuff that's said about you on social media, you literally wouldn't get out of bed.
No, I don't. So
and that's the case for most people. And it's that's why I worry for a lot of these young politicians who are just arriving and they're suddenly going to find this. And I always say to them, well, just have somebody check it for you. Have somebody make sure that if there are serious death threats on there, that the cops know about it. But generally, what are you going to learn? What are you going to learn about yourself or about anybody else just from seeing a load of abuse on social media? So, but I think it is important to be. I have sometimes stopped and talked to people. I don't want to encourage people to shout at me in the street, but I have sometimes stopped and talked to them. Sometimes angrily, sometimes completely rationally and calmly. Yeah, I think it's important to. I think it's important to challenge stuff like that.
Yeah, you agreeing disagreeably is kind of like an expression that keeps coming up in your podcast. I love it because I'm a fan of civil discourse in a world that's becoming so uncivil, unnecessarily uncivil.
Yeah,
because I'm only saying what you know. We'll learn nothing if it's one, foghorn against another.
And yet, isn't it, you see, I sometimes think that. Well, even now, even though I'm conscious of it, I can still get into an absolute rage on Twitter. Now, I've basically stopped using Twitter because I think Musk is an absolute outrage. And
have you met and chatted with him?
No.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
And what would you ask him?
I think I'd ask him why he keeps spreading these kind of weird conspiracy theories about Britain, about which he clearly knows nothing.
Yeah. Some ugly theories after the stabbing.
Yeah,
of those
just
four
weird.
children.
And I think that, look, the guy's unbelievably influential, very powerful, very, very wealthy. He's got this whole kind of satellite thing going on. He's got his Tesla thing going on. He's now got his Twitter thing going on.
And now a Trump thing going on.
And now a big Trump thing going on. Just kind of, calm down a bit and maybe try to use what power and wealth and stuff you got as a force for good. He probably thinks he is doing it as a force for good. But it's hard to see that right now. And I don't just make that as a political point. I think once you start, you see, the other book, the book that I know you asked for a book that made you cry.
I did.
Right. Now I've actually chosen a book that makes me weep, which is different.
Well, let's go straight there because we've wandered away from the bookshelf. We're coming back to it now. So let's go to it. Plugged the book that made you cry, not cry. You've actually given a whole new title. The book that made you weep. Alastair Campbell is what?
It's The Sovereign Individual by Jacob Rees-Mogg's father, William Rees-Mogg. Co-written. I've got it here. It's one of the few books. I don't like marking books, but this book I've marked all over the place. Mastering the Transition to the Information Age by James Dale Davidson and Lord William Rees-Mogg. And it was written in about 1997 when we were,
when you were starting off
into power and all that stuff.
New Labour.
And it is, the reason it makes me weep is because it's written almost like a sort of a memo to rich people who want to be even richer, to powerful people who want to be more powerful. And it's a guide to how you can master the transition of the information age that's coming so as that basically the wealthy and the powerful can escape the clutches of any sort of democratic control and accountability. So it kind of presages Brexit, it presages the whole kind of, Islam taking over as a kind of, sort of one of the sort of great dividing things with the West. It presages the whole sort of crypto world. It's an amazing book. And it makes me weep because I think, my God, these guys have been hiding in plain sight. And this is the sort of Bible. The sovereign individual is somebody who is so powerful that they are sovereign. They can do what they want with their money. They can do what they want with the way they live their lives.
Unfettered.
And absolutely unfettered. And there's one bit that sort of sums it up. It really pisses me off as well because he abuses a Beatles song, which is a very naughty thing to do.
Not happy about that now, myself.
Well, really not. I think it's page 24. Hold on.
So it sounds like you're describing a very prescient manual.
Well, it is. That's exactly what it is. Here we go. Cyberspace is the ultimate offshore jurisdiction, an economy with no taxes, Bermuda in the sky with diamonds. When this greatest tax haven of them all is fully open for business, all funds will essentially be offshore funds at the discretion of their owner. This will have cascading consequences. The state has grown used to treating its taxpayers as a farmer treats its cows, keeping them in a field to be milked. Soon the cows will have wings. And it basically says that governments are bad. It talks about Clinton was the kind of main figure in American politics at the time. It basically equates him with a kind of mafia boss. It's kind of he's basically like an organized crime lord trying to steal money from these wonderful, clever people. And the sovereign individual is Musk. The sovereign individual is Peter Thiel. The sovereign individual is Zuckerberg.
Tech bros.
Yeah, the sovereign individual are these people who think that taxes for poor people and little people. And he also talks about how this is going to lead to ugly scenes between classes, between nations. But they're basically saying it's a fantastic thing because we are going to get even richer. And then if you think about it, what did Jacob Rees-Mogg do after Brexit?
Go on.
He shifted loads of his money to Ireland.
To Ireland, yeah.
Because he's a sovereign individual.
And an unelected MP now.
Well, he's out of office, yeah, but he's not going to suffer too much.
No.
And so there's his dad writing this stuff.
That's extraordinary.
In 1997. So this is the book that makes me weep. There you go.
What an interesting choice. I think what intrigues me about that is, so New Labour came into power in, was it 97?
Yeah.
And in May 97, you guys came in. There's that book written. And here we are in 2024, not the tail end of 2024. I wonder, when did you first read this book? Was it in 97?
No, it wasn't. I'll tell you what happened.
So it was after the event, nearly going, holy smoke, this has all come true.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. In fact, I wrote one of my books I wrote recently, But What Can I Do? I wrote a lot about this book because, and what happened was I'd actually been talking to the FA.
Football Association.
Football, as a coaching session in St. George's Park, loads of coaches. And I got a train back and I was getting off the train at Marylebone and this guy chased me down the platform. And he recognised me getting off the train. He chased me down the platform and he gave me this.
He gave it to you.
And he said, you have to read this book. Wow. Unless you read this book, you will not understand Brexit. You won't understand this whole sort of populism, polarisation stuff that you keep banging on about. You've got to read this book. And the next week, I had to get a train to Aberdeen. So what year would that have been? You can check this. It was the year that Burnley were in Europe.
Well, you're asking me.
I know, and there haven't been that many of them. And I started it in London, and I read it, and as you can see, I've underlined it. I've reread it.
You wept,
and I thought, Jesus, these guys have been hiding in plain sight the whole time.
Our final question to you as we wrap up our fascinating. I really enjoyed our chat today, Alastair. I must say, really, and you're not grumpy at all. You're softy. I don't know if you are that either, but anyway. The name of the autobiography you have not written yet. Now, we know you've written diaries and novels and everything in between. But in 2024, lots happened since your last. I mean, you've written, obviously, there's the kids' books and there's. I get that. Yeah. But I really want something that sums up your life as we speak or today. Now.
Or when I die.
Oh, crikey. It's the name of the autobiography you haven't written yet. That covers a multitude. But your life in a book title.
Well, I'll tell you the title I'd want. I got my passport back.
Do you have any Irish blood in you at all? No?
None at all.
Oh, crikey. Sorry about that.
I've asked every
Irish great-grandmother. Have you?
Yeah. Just give it to me. Just give it to me. I said, 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. I thought, why can't they just
an honour system of some sort?
Blair, Jonathan Powell, me, John Holmes, descendants of Mo Molam, just say, here's your Irish passport.
Yeah. And thank you sort of thing. Is that it? Yeah.
Nothing happened.
You need to get the Taoiseach on to leading and see if you can.
I tried the last one. Leo, I tried.
Yeah.
I said, come on, just give me a passport.
Well, try again.
So anyway, what do you think about that as a title?
I like it a lot because it sums up your Europhile tendencies, your battle against Brexit. I don't think we'll ever understand Brexit. I think we could do a 6-hour interview about Brexit, to be honest with you, especially from an Irish perspective, looking at you guys and peace in Northern Ireland. We could do 10 shows anyway, as you know, about different things. But I love the title, but it's not beautiful, but it's a good. Do you
think it would do?
It'll do fine. Did you want to? I get the sense there's another one coming.
Well, I thought about just carrying on with the diaries and just having a single page final entry that just was today I died.
You see, that brings with it a pathos and a pithiness that I think probably sums you up.
What do you think?
Yeah, I love it.
Today I died.
I think we'll go with that. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And to you as always, Ryan. I'm glad to see you still smiling after your ups and downs.
Thank you so much. We all have them. Alastair Campbell, thank you.
Thank you.
So here's this week's Ryan Recommends, brought to you by Eason, Ireland's favourite bookseller. I'm going to go with The Blue Hour by Paula Hawkins. You'll remember Paula Hawkins, of course, because she wrote The Girl on the Train. Great book, sophisticated little thriller, that. But this is totally different. It's about an artist, essentially, on an island. Think of Omey Island in Connemara, but it's obviously in the UK. And there's a lot of skullduggery, a lot of shenanigans. People want a bit of the art. People want a bit of the story. It's told with a sea fog, essentially, constantly coming in. Think Daphne du Maurier, think Rebecca, and you've got a great sense of the story. Paula Hawkins writes very elegantly and eloquently, if you can do such a thing. So that's why I'm going to give her book the recommendation this week. This book and all the books we discuss on this episode of our podcast are available now in your local Eason store, or order them online from easons.com before 6 p.m. for same-day dispatch with free delivery when you spend over a tenner. Eason, be inspired.